Wow, was it ever hot in here this evening. Hey kids, you know, in the world of collectible masks, every now and then a mask comes along that is just iconic, a mask that's special, a mask that's sort of legendary and loved by millions. I would say Boris Karloff as Frankenstein is one such mask. Darth Vader, maybe a hockey mask, you know, of Jason, hockey mask. Tor Johnson is one such mask. Michael Myers. You know, those masks are kind of more perennial favorites, I guess you'd call them, than a lot of the other designs out there. And one such mask that was popular for many, many years, and in fact still is, and lucky you because you can get one, the Don Post skull. Now, every mask collection has to have at least one skull in it. I think that's a federal mandate. I think around the time of Obamacare was when they passed that law that every mask collection had to have a skull. So, you know, if you have a mask collection and you don't have a skull in it, and you're tired of paying that fine every year for not having a skull in your mask collection, well, let me at least point you to a good, worthy skull. Now, the Don Post skull came out originally in 1967. That was a long time ago, wasn't it? And it looked pretty much like this. Okay, now this same skull was in production for many, many years with some minor variations. The first ones were vinyl, and I think they were the best ones, by the way. Some of the early vinyl ones are my favorite versions of the skull. They were made of really thick, heavy, either black or brown vinyl, and then stipple painted or sponge painted with the white. Over the years there were some tan ones and some kind of beige, yellowy ones. There were glow-in-the-dark ones. There were ones made of latex, and just various, you know, endless variations on a theme. Infinite diversity and infinite combinations with the Don Post skull. Many, many years. The same skull would come out every Halloween. And so in 1982, when they were making the ridiculous movie Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, which everybody thought was going to be about Michael Myers, but it isn't. It's about masks that turn people's heads into a pile of live snakes. If you've seen the movie, you're like, well, yeah. If you haven't, you're going, oh, he's just making up dumb, silly stuff. No, that's what the movie's about. But anyway, they needed 3 masks for that movie, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. They needed a skull and a pumpkin and a witch. So the pumpkin, they had a new sculpture done by Jim Leonard at Don Post Studios. The witch, they used a witch mask that Don Post already had in production, and for the skull, they simply used the classic Don Post skull, which had been around in one form or another since 1967. They just took some from Don Post's storage area and put them in the movie, and it looks like, you know, it looks like fresh masks made for the movie, but it was just a pre-existing mask. Now, at that time, 1983, I believe, 82, 83, they released a slightly different edition of the classic skull from Don Post, and this one, what was different about it? Not much really, but it did. It was painted over with glow-in-the-dark paint, and it had the silver shamrock. You see this little thing on here? It had this thing because the company that makes the masks in the movie, in the story, is called Silver Shamrock Novelties. And everybody wanted one that had one of these little silver shamrock dealies on it, like in the film. So these were put on there. I believe they were just cardboard, at least the ones I saw back in the day were just punched out of cardboard, like what would later come to be known as a POG, basically. But, well, why am I talking about an old mask from back in the 60s and 70s and 80s from a company that's no longer in business? What is wrong with me today? Well, the men have spent their fortunes trying to answer that one, but let me tell you, the cool thing is Trick or Treat Studios reissued the Halloween 3 skull, also known as the Don Post skull, in time for Halloween of 2014. And their version of it looks great. It looks just like the old ones that I remember from centuries ago. And boy, kids, I gotta tell you, it's so cool to be able to walk into a costume shop or a Halloween store in 2014 and look at this same skull up there looking back at me that I saw when I was a child, you know, that's very cool. The skull is back and he's popular again. Back in action, this skull. Now, some of the differences are, this one is latex. A lot of the ones back in the day were vinyl, as previously mentioned. There were latex Don Post skulls, but they came a little bit later, and the Don Post skull that was the Halloween 3 tie-in version was generally vinyl. So this is latex, it's not vinyl, but it looks just like it. It's got a good paint job, and I've already heard collectors complain about the paint job, that it's not detailed enough. But folks, this mask was not like a super expensive high-end collectible thing. Back in the day they had simple paint job. They were just stippled, sponge painted with the white, and that's pretty much the deal. Now there is one flaw in some of these, and hopefully you won't get one like that, but if you do, don't burn your home down, because let me just show you what you can do about it. Some of them were painted, some of the Trick or Treat edition ones from 2014 and beyond were erroneously painted without that white line down the center of the nasal cavity. Okay, that's called the perpendicular plate within the nasal septum. You see that? Now there's your difference. It's very small, but it's really supposed to be painted. It really looks more like the original mask with the perpendicular plate of the nasal septum colored in white. So that should be there. That white line should be down the middle of the nose hole. Okay? So if you get one without it, like I said, don't go into conniption fits of panic, or don't call the Coast Guard or an exorcist or anything. You can fix it yourself. All you have to do, and no, I'm not going to say something that's not useful to everybody, like go to your mask painting workshop and fire up the air compressor and get your mask paint. I know that's not helpful to most people, so I will just say, go to your local arts and crafts supply store or the craft department at your local mall ward and just get some acrylic craft paint like this. This is a little bottle of white paint. It says apple barrel. It's apple barrel paint, and it comes in lots of different colors. Get the non-gloss, don't get gloss white, just get plain white, because the paint that Trick or Treat Studios use on the mask is just white. It's not a fancy color that you have to mix with all sorts of eggshell and beige and ecru and all that stuff. You just need white. Take a little of the white, put it on a little piece of sponge, little piece of foam rubber, anything like that, and just dab it onto the center of the nose hole to hit the perpendicular plate. And I'm going to tell you, that is what I have done to this one, because this one did not have the perpendicular plate painted in white. So I just took a little of the El Cheapo Walmart, I think it's like $1 a bottle, $1.19 or something like that, Walmart paint, and just painted that, dabbed a little bit of it on there, and it looks perfect to me. You know, it looks fine. So that's really all you need to do. Now, one more fascinating trivia tidbit about this particular mask is that right before closing its doors unceremoniously in 2012, Don Post Studios released, in response to collector demand, a reissue of the Halloween 3 edition of the classic skull. And you know what? I'm going to back up a little here and interrupt myself, because did I point out that the silver shamrock tag is actually better on the Trick or Treat one than it was on the real Don Post ones, because these are punched out of plastic instead of just cardboard. So that's pretty nice right there. But in 2012, right before Don Post closed its doors, they released their final version of it, and let's shop and compare. I just happen to have one here. Now, not many of these were made, only a few dozen. They came out right at the time Don Post was shut down, and only some production samples were made. So these go for crazy prices now online. But they are vinyl, which is good, because it's a little more like the ones from the 1980s. On the downside, the silver shamrock thing is just printed on cardstock, just plain old cardstock. It does have a little picture of a computer chip printed on the back, but it's not three-dimensional. It's just a picture. It's just a flat photo of a computer chip. which ties into the movie, but yeah, it isn't that exciting. The other thing is, as you may be able to tell, it's quite a bit smaller. And I like the Trick or Treat one better. I know. I love Don Post Studios, and Don Post Studios was the ultimate king of masks for many years. But given these two masks, I would say the Trick or Treat edition, which is still available, and has the advantage of selling for about 50 bucks instead of a gazillion dollars like an actual Don Post vinyl, is the superior one because it's quite a bit larger. Now, I had one of these back in the day, and it was large like this one. It was not small and skimpy like the 2012 reissue. And another problem with the 2012 reissue is a lot of them tend to be scrunched and smushed out of shape, because by this time, whoever was packing the merchandise at Don Post Studios wasn't even putting them in nice plastic bags or stuffing them with paper or any of that. They were just throwing them loose in the boxes and sending them out. So by the time they got to people, they got kind of crunched. And you can see, even though I take pretty good care of things and I try to stuff masks out into their proper shape, even this one is a little bit lumpy, because they almost all are. Now, there is one regard in which the Don Post one beats the Trick or Treat one. One regard, and that is it actually glows in the dark, like the ones back in the day. As you can see, it looks pretty much white, but if you turn out the lights and blow out this candle here, this would glow a nice glow-in-the-dark classic Halloween green, and this one wouldn't. So that's the one area where I think the Trick or Treat one has room for improvement, is it should have glow-in-the-dark paint on there. Don't you think so? But it doesn't, but it looks fabulously great in normal lighting, and it looks just like back in the day. You know, it's a nostalgic sort of skull. And now I'm going to try training these guys to form a singing trio while you go do something productive with the rest of your life.